So thank you everyone for coming to this first panel. I'm Betty Wong, and this is our day 2 of our Founders Over 40 Unconference. Today's focus is actually on buying a business. And I'm very excited to have all of you meet Marianne Cordiano and Jose Jimenez and Leslie Kuban. All three of them are actually going to be talking about various issues related to buying a franchise. And they taught me so much so far in my conversations with them. I want to actually just right now focus your attention on Leslie Kuban. On my screen, she's in the center, but you can see all their names on the bottom of the screen. So Leslie and I have been kind of chatting with each other for on and off for a couple of years now, at least, maybe even 3. And I just want to say that Leslie has been a fabulous franchise industry expert. I've heard her speak, and basically, she is a certified franchise executive and marketing president of FranNet in Atlanta, a locally owned and operated franchise consulting firm. Leslie's personal experience as a multi-brand franchise owner provides a very unique perspective in helping her clients to assess their real opportunities, the risks, and the timing to make the decisions. So she's actually helped me to bring on Jose Jimenez, who actually she has sold a franchise to, advised on selling a franchise to. She's a founding member of the Georgia State University Franchise Entrepreneurship Advisory Board. And apparently she's also a neighbor in terms of being in the same town as Marianne Cordiano in Cleveland. So I've discovered today that she is actually not bi-coastal, but partly living in the middle of our country as well as on the coast. So I want to introduce Leslie Kuban, and Leslie, take it away. I'm going to disappear now.
Okay, great. Thank you, Betty. And really delighted to be a part of this effort. Franchising has been my career for the last 25 years. It's been a great ride. And I do find for many people, though, it's a misunderstood and sometimes overlooked pathway in entrepreneurship. So really excited to have Marianne and Jose are going to help me provide some enlightening education today. And I'm going to ask you guys some questions and we're going to get to know you and really appreciate you taking time out of your businesses to share with our viewership today. So Marianne, I'll start with you. Just, again, your name, what is your business? Who are your customers and how long have you been in your business? And then Jose, if you would answer the same question afterwards.
Yep. So I'm Marianne Cordiano and I'm with CMIT Solutions of Cleveland Downtown and East. That's our geo name. And we have had our franchise for about 3.5 years. And CMIT has been around for over 20 years. And there are, at this point, over 240 offices with CMIT across the US. And basically, we do outsourced IT for small to medium-sized businesses. So everything from hardware to infrastructure to cybersecurity. Our tagline is, we worry about IT so you don't have to. And that's what we do. And my husband is my business partner, so we've got a unique business and personal relationship. So far so good.
Great.
Thanks for having me.
And my name is Jose Jimenez. I own 2 alphographic centers in the Atlanta area. I jumped into this business about a little bit over 2 years ago. I built a brand new location and acquired and converted an existing sign shop into a second alphographics. The network itself has been around for over 50 years. In fact, I just attended the owners conference where a year later, due to the pandemic, we celebrated our 50th anniversary. The way I like to describe what we do, we solve the visual communications of any organization, be it a large or small business, a nonprofit, or government organization. We print, we make signs, we install, we design, and we also do promotional items. So whatever audience you're trying to reach, we can help you get there.
Great. So both interesting examples of business to business services in the world of franchising. One of the interesting learning opportunities or educating opportunities that I have with people is when we hear the word franchise, we think of food. Then here are 2 great examples of professional services franchises catering to the needs of other businesses. So you both had corporate careers before going into your own business. And I believe in both cases, this was your first business. So you'd had a long career working for big companies, and you decided to go into your own business, and you decided to do that through franchising. So Marianne, again, back to you. Just tell us a little bit about that decision process. What had you decide on business ownership through franchising as a pathway that you wanted to pursue?
Sure. So my corporate experience was actually in human resources and recruiting. And about 10, 15 years ago, I actually went out on my own and was doing freelance consulting. But in that same field, my husband was in corporate America, and we had always talked about starting our own business. And we just assumed we'd buy an existing business, maybe somebody who was retiring, who was looking to sell. And so back in 2017, the timing was right. And but Ed happened to meet a franchise consultant, coincidentally from FranNet. And he came home one day and said, I think we should meet with this franchise consultant. And I laughed out loud, to be totally honest. I said, why would we meet with a franchise consultant? He's like, about franchise opportunities. And again, like most people, I thought it was all food. And I grew up actually in a very entrepreneurial family. We owned a restaurant among other businesses. And so personally, I just did not want food. So he said, well, we should just still meet with her. I think there's some other things besides food. So I kind of rolled my eyes and said, okay, we'll meet with her, but, I don't think this is going to go anywhere. And she, proceeded to explain that, yes, food is a portion of the franchises, but there are a lot of other options. And so we, heard about some different options, and CMIT really spoke to us and what we wanted. And and so we signed on, we jumped in. It was literally only about a 2.5 month process from when we first started. So I got educated in franchising in a short amount of time, because I really did not know much about it. But we learned the process pretty quickly.
And before we move on from you, Marianne, do you remember what were your criteria kind of going into that process of, we want to go into a business, but we don't know what? What were your criteria that ultimately had you choose the business that you're now in, CMIT Solutions?
So we really wanted B2B. Both of us just, it just spoke to us from our backgrounds and whatnot. So B2B, we wanted something that we could really be passionate about, that would be, I don't want to say easy to sell, but things that we could really feel. And both of us at some point in our career had worked for a small company. And so we saw what the technology drain was on that small business when technology wasn't working, and how productivity came to a halt. And we had been hearing more and more about cybersecurity issues and concerns. So for us, we feel like this is something that we feel like we're helping, we're taking the burden off of business owners, that we could really sit across the table from a business owner and kind of understand their pains and frustrations and come up with the solutions to help them.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Jose, you,
Sure.
same question, your background and what had you think about business ownership and then think about franchising as
Definitely.
your pathway?
Well, as you know, Leslie, you were a significant element of that journey. I did not come from the world of marketing and visual communications at all. I studied electrical engineering in college, and my professional career, most of which I spent dealing with the laws and regulations that govern network utilities, working first for the state of California, and then for a large Atlanta-based cable and telecommunications company. I then jumped into diversity and inclusion and HR for a minute. And then when that role got eliminated in the summer of 18, I decided, okay, so what do I want to do next? I've been a civil servant. I've been a corporate drone. So what's next for me? I briefly thought about consulting, but knowing me, I'm a social being, and in my image, and I don't know if Marianne would agree with this, but because she did consulting unlike me, I view consulting as a bit of a lonely job, or it can be. So I thought, okay, I don't know if that's for me. So I decided to look into small business ownership, and pretty quickly, in October of 18, I remember I Googled franchising, and what came back to me were thousands of pages of information about franchising. I was lucky because in one of those, I learned what a franchise advisor does, or a franchise consultant. And frankly, I relied on Leslie and a couple of folks like her to help guide me about what this would be like and the best franchise network for me. Obviously we have some financial goals in mind. Every one of them administered this. I think they're important because they let them know who we are or who I was. And so that allowed them to pair me with possible franchise opportunities. Alpha Graphics really spoke to me. It was at the time a discussion about acquiring existing Alpha Graphics in the Atlanta area, but that deal did not come through. But I loved what I heard from the franchisor, and I loved the brand promise of Alpha Graphics, and so I decided to jump with both feet. I started the process in October. On February of 2019, I signed the first franchise agreement. And in the process of opening a brand new Alpha Graphics in the network, the first one in several years, I came to learn about an existing sign shop whose owner was retiring. And so I began conversations with him. And on August 1st of 2019, I took over operations for that existing sign shop. And on September 1st, 2019, or just a month later, I opened the doors to my new location.
And that's a strategy called acquire and convert, folks, which you see in a lot of different industries, which can be a great way to buy an existing book of business, but then still benefit from all the various systems and brand that are part of the franchise. So Jose, if you think back to February of 2019, when you were kind of at that it's altar day, you've done all the due diligence. This is not something that you've come from before. Right. So kind of thinking through that, this is very different from your background. What gave you the confidence to move forward with this decision of this business with this franchise? Can you remember back to that?
Oh, sure. So in December of 18, I'll begin there. I went to what I believe is a common activity among franchises. I went to Discovery Day. So Discovery Day, I attended a meeting over a few days in Denver, Colorado, where Alpha Graphics had just moved its headquarters. And while I was there, I got introduced to the leadership of the organization and the support that the franchise would provide me as a new owner. They were not afraid to invite me into the network, even though I didn't have the background, because they, as a franchise, do offer the support structure around that. It doesn't mean that they're going to be making daily decisions for me. And I've had a lot to learn. And I know that I will never know as much as the people who choose every day to come work for me. But I was comfortable with what I heard that day. Once I committed to signing the franchise agreement in early February of 19, then there was a more intensive training program for new owners of the network. I flew back to Denver and spent a week there learning the ins and outs of the operation. I felt confident about jumping into this because of that knowledge, that support. I've also relied tremendously on the talent of the people I've been able to bring in. It's been challenging at times. Often I have to scramble for answers to a particularly thorny sign, for instance. But I wanted to learn. I knew where I could go to learn, and the franchise provided that. And so that made it easy.
Yeah, good. Okay, great. So that's kind of getting into what I want to ask Marianne. Now you, pros and cons. What are your few years into ownership of your business? What are you seeing the benefits, and are there some disadvantages that you're finding to owning your business through a franchise brand?
I would say the biggest pro is the collaboration. So CMIT Solutions is extremely collaborative. It started back when we were going through the process before we even signed on. They encouraged us to talk to existing franchise owners. And that was extremely helpful to us. And we really asked them, tell us the pros, tell us the cons, tell it like it is. And they did. But for us, that really kind of helped solidify our decision. And so we knew what we were getting into. And they all said, the same thing is the collaboration. And it really has been amazing in between home office, but then between all the franchisees as well. For example, we ended up about a year and a half ago joining a mastermind group. And so we're in a group with 10 other franchisees around the country, from everywhere from New York City to Atlanta to Boise, Idaho to Dallas, and everywhere in between. And we speak 3 times a month. And then we do these limelight reviews on each other once per quarter. And those are just invaluable. I mean, we're constantly pushing each other to grow our businesses. And so that collaboration has been invaluable. And then about 2 years ago, I actually pitched the idea to home office. I had just gone to our convention in May of 2019, and I came home and I said to my husband, I've got an idea. I'm going to pitch to home office. And of course, he rolled his eyes and I was like, oh no, what? I said, you walk into these rooms at a technology franchise consultant, and it's 85% men, 15% women. And I said, it'd be nice to get the women together in some kind of a group. So I pitched to home office. They said, great idea. It's literally started with just an email distribution group, and we would just chime in and we're a resource for each other and just a sounding board. And that led to, when COVID started, one of the women came up with the idea to start monthly Zoom happy hours. So we started doing that, and that's been fantastic. And so, and then we've got a Teams channel where you can reach out to anybody, and the techs are constantly talking. And so it's just extremely collaborative. So I would say, and we get a lot of marketing support. We get a weekly quick tips from home office, different things that they provide for us. The cons, obviously there's, some structure and things that you have to follow. Whereas if you were completely a solo business and you weren't part of a franchise, that you could do on your own. But honestly, CMIT is pretty flexible with, marketing, as long as we stay within the guidelines of the logo and all that. They're pretty flexible. And while they provide us, different vendors and stuff, there's not many things that we're tied to. So for us, we liked having that ability to, be a little bit flexible with, having the structure, but putting our own stamp on our own franchise.
Yeah, and I'll underscore the first point about collaboration. And, Jose touched on kind of the support and training from corporate, but you also get that from your fellow franchisees. You're all wearing the same jersey, you're growing your businesses. It's by and large a collaborative type of culture that you find with a lot of brands. You make friends. I know I've made great friends with a number of my fellow franchisees over the years. So Jose, I'd love your perspective on that. Just benefits and disadvantages that you're experiencing, have your business through a franchise.
Sure. I mean, I will echo what Marianne said about and you also, Leslie, about the collaboration. So when I joined the network, I made it a point to go to every center in operation in Atlanta at the time, all of the other Alpha Graphics owners in this region. I wanted to get to know them. I wanted to see how they had set up shop. Since I was building a new one, I wanted to know what they had, the kind of equipment, and they were all very much welcoming. I went in, they made the time for me, and I found that a very invaluable kind of first step to later collaboration when I finally got into operations. I have often spoken to people who are considering joining the Alpha Graphics network. And frankly, I believe the single biggest benefit is the fact that you're not doing this on your own. Doesn't mean that if you're an independent small business owner, that you cannot make friends with the chamber, etc. But I do think there is a difference when you have other people, as Leslie said, who wear the same colors on the jersey, who not only have the brand to protect, because if one of us has a poor job, it does have an impact on how the clientele or the prospects can view the brand. But so it's important to maintain that connection and to collaborate with each other and help each other. And that comes naturally, but it's good to understand that brand protection and making sure that we're doing the right thing, but everybody in Atlanta is important. There's always, there are some financial benefits. You have a large network. Alpha Graphics has over 250 centers around the world. It's actually an international brand. It gives a brand buying power. And so from that perspective, when you sit down with a supplier of some of the elements we require for manufacture, there are benefits in pricing, et cetera. That's very much bottom line, but that's important. That's another benefit. Downside, I would say, there are some, Alpha Graphics is not a very rigid franchise. And I did explore a couple of other franchises when I was looking to see what I wanted to do next. And I saw some of them are being more rigid. I get a lot of freedom within the franchise to execute on what we need to do for our clients. Now, there is this thing about giving somebody who doesn't have any experience rope to hang himself. I haven't done that, but my people have probably wanted to hang me a couple of times over a couple of projects that I decided to take on. We won't go there. But, so that's both a plus and a potential, because there's nothing that dictates you shall do this. don't get me wrong. I mean, there are some obligations you need to meet, some reporting you need to do. And obviously, I'm not going to be flipping burgers under an Graphics brand. But and there are some pieces of software that you're required to buy, but by and large, they're wonderful pieces of software. So it's really more of that, where there's some rigidity in the structure on those pieces of software. Yeah, but I would hesitate to call that a major negative in any way. I also know that as my career in this, ends in maybe a decade or more, there will come a time when I want to sell, and I understand that the act of selling a franchise is not as freewheeling potentially as the act of selling an independent business. The franchise will have a stake, will have a say in whom you sell, because they have an overarching interest in making sure the future owners not only are there to protect the brand, but maintain the operations as they have been.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. So, so let's talk a little bit about advice for our viewers. Jose, if we'll continue. There's a lot of people on the call that are going to plug in, and they're likely in a similar position as you were a few years ago, kind of thinking about, am I going to do something different? Am I going to step out? Should I pursue franchising or something else? Just what advice would you give people if they're considering a franchise? Maybe some tips on due diligence would be helpful.
I mean, tip number one would be rely on Leslie and people like her. By the way, Leslie's not paying me for this.
I should.
She's not paying me for this, but understand, as I said, I literally went on Google and typed franchising, and the amount of information, the number of business models, what you can do. As Leslie said, it is not just about a restaurant or a coffee shop. You have franchises to do home improvement. You have franchises to do, as Marianne's, to do IT, to do security, to do what we do. So given that amount of choice, I would strongly encourage you, as tip number one, go and speak to someone who can help guide you through this. Otherwise, you may not make it your own choice, but you may miss some things, opportunities that you may not have thought about. Tip number two, review the, what do they call it? The franchise disclosure document. Every franchise is required by the federal, I think it's the Federal Trade Commission, to disclose to you the financials of the organization, the franchisees in the network, and some critical elements like fees that you are going to be on the hook for, either at the start or during the time that you are in the franchise. Take advantage of the opportunity to speak to current owners. Franchises are required again to make them available to you. So call. As I said, I have spoken to many in my 2+ years, always with the goal of giving them the facts as I know them. And the last tip I'll throw in for now is understand that it will be hard. This is not a journey that is without stress or without challenges, but it can be so rewarding as well. So understand that there is a balance there, and understand that, yes, there is a potential for significant financial reward, but also know that this is going to stress, it's going to, particularly if you're coming from another industry, but even if you're already in the industry, running your own business, running your own shop is going to bring challenges to you if you've never done them before, that will test you.
Yeah, that's great. And we're going to start to wrap it up here. Marianne, same thing. What would you add about advice for people considering this, due diligence, or anything that comes to mind for you?
Yeah,
to share.
Absolutely. I would echo as a lot of the stuff that Jose said. Definitely, due diligence. I would also say, be honest with yourself. And people will say, "I want to get a corporate America because I'm tired of the stress. I'm tired of the long hours." And it's like, be honest with yourself and talk to current franchisees, because there is stress, there are challenges and rewards, and there are long hours. They're typically your hours, so you can kind of have a little bit more flexibility, which I like. But yeah, and especially if you're going to be going to do something that is different than what you've had your career in, if you're a life learner, like I've always been a lifetime learner. So for me, it's interesting and exciting to learn something new. If that's not your personality, then just think about that, because you're going to, and also you're going to wear a lot of hats. You're going to be sales and marketing and finance and technology and operations. So, understand that you're going to have to wear a lot of hats, and yes, you can hire people, but it still all falls on you, as the owner. So just be honest with yourself. And sometimes people, I think, are so wanting to get out of corporate America, and so they don't necessarily ask all the questions or see things, the reality. So talk to as many people as you can in the franchising world and really get a good perspective. And also find out about the competitive market. That's one thing we didn't do as much of, but in a way it was probably good, because we found out there are a lot of outsourced IT companies in the Cleveland area. So as we went out and started networking, we actually started like an Excel spreadsheet, because we would just laugh every time we came home with like another one. But it was probably good that we didn't realize that, because maybe we would have been a little hesitant to, but we've got a lot of differentiators over them. And being a franchise is actually one of those, because of all the resources we get. And like Jose said, the buying power of being part of a national franchise.
That's great. Betty, I'm going to turn it back over to you to, or let me know how you'd like me to handle some questions in our final few minutes.
Okay, so I think you can hear me, even though you can't see me. I see a couple of questions, so maybe I can just read them out to Marianne and Jose, and maybe you can they can answer, and even you can answer, I think, enlighten us. So one of the questions was, how does the cost usually work beyond the sales price? I'm assuming that means the franchise licensing cost. And is there an average percentage of revenue that you have to pay? So I think generally, if people are interested in becoming franchisees, they might be very interested in how that works.
How about I'll address that generally, and then
Okay.
Jose, Marianne, I think what the question is about the fees that are associated with buying into a franchise brand. And there's always fees. All these wonderful benefits that we've talked about do have a cost to them. So there's usually a one-time upfront licensing fee that gives a new franchisee access to all of these systems, all of the vendors, all of the knowledge, the intelligence, the collective intelligence of the franchisor and the franchisees, the training. But then that's actually not where most franchise brands make their money. Where the franchisor, the parent organization, derives profit from offering franchising is through the ongoing fees that they assess, typically called a royalty. And that royalty is often a percentage of gross sales. Sometimes it's a flat fee, but it's mostly a percentage of gross sales. And then there's usually a contractual commitment to spend money on marketing into a national brand fund, perhaps also in your market locally. And I know this is true for me, but in my franchise, we also have a technology fee that they continue to enhance, augment, and improve our technology. So that is a shared cost. So Marianne, Jose, anything you guys would add from your experience?
That's basically exactly, yeah, that's dead on what I would say too. Yeah, it's the upfront fees and then the royalty fees and the marketing fees.
I agree. I mean, Leslie, I would say, I think part of the question was, is there an average? I can tell you that I explored 3 different franchises before I jumped into Alpha Graphics, and the royalties had a significant range. So that franchise disclosure document is important for you to understand, what is it that the franchisor would expect in terms of a royalty. I mean, the range for me, from what I remember, was between 5 and 9%. And it could probably go higher. Leslie would know more than me. And if you question the value of that royalty, understand that there is a power to the brand too. That if you're building something on your own from the ground up, and suppose you wanted to call it, Atlanta Sign Company, then you have to build that brand into the marketplace. If you buy into a franchise, part of the royalty goes to something that they have already built over years, hopefully.
Thank you all. So we are having to wrap up because the next session is actually at 1:30. But I want to thank Leslie and Marianne and Jose for all the information that they have shared with us. It has been actually fascinating to learn. And I find that I have to listen to them over and over again, because each time I learn different facets about how they got into franchising and what they're getting out of franchising. So I want to thank everyone. The next panel we're actually putting on in the chat room, And also you will see it in the email that all of you have received. So again, I want to thank Leslie, Marianne, Jose, and it's just so wonderful that you were able to join us and take some time out of your lunch to do this. And I look forward to meeting all of you someday in person. I know this is virtual and a lot of things happen in virtual, but look, think of it this way. Today we're having a virtual meeting talking about franchising in Atlanta, Cleveland, and New York. And so I appreciate your help and I look forward to seeing you all in person one day. So everyone, thank you very much again for your time.